In this video, I'm going to show you how you can make external resources downloadable on your website. So in HTML, you have your anchor tags, but you also have the download attributes, which when you add would make the content of that link downloadable. So for example, in this case, I'm using it for these images, and when I click on this link, instead of taking me to the link of the image, it's going to download the image. If I come to my downloads directory here, you can see this image is downloaded. I can do the same thing for the second one. If I go here, now I have this second image. This is how platforms like Unsplash allow you to download their images to your device. But there is an exception with this download attribute. That exception is when you are pointing to a resource that is on a different origin. So I have my server currently running on HTTP localhost 58265. So this download attribute would only work for resources that are hosted on this server. But then here I have this local server, which is on localhost 3000. And when you go to this part image.png, I return this image. So now here where I'm using the download attribute, but I'm pointing to a different origin, which is for the third image. When I click on this, instead of downloading the image, it's just going to take me to the URL of that image, which as you can see at the top here is localhost 3000/image.png. So how can I make the images on a different server also downloadable? Because maybe you want to host your images somewhere else instead of the server where you have your front-end application. But that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this video. So here I'm going to do some JavaScript, and basically what we'll be doing here is we'll be working with blobs and ObjectURLs. I plan to make a separate video where I dive deeper into blobs and ObjectURLs, but I'll just explain the basic idea here. So what I'm going to do is to first get all my links that point to external resources. So I'm going to call this external download links. It's going to be document.query selector all, and then I'm going to get all the links that have the download attributes and also has the href attributes starting with HTTP. So now if I should come here and do console log external download links, and I open the console, where you can see we have just one link which has the download attribute, but the href is HTTP. Because if we come back here, all of the other images are just images/this, but this specific one has HTTP, so we know it's external. Or you can also get your external links with a different selector. This is just for demo purposes. Now I'm going to create a function. This is going to be an async function because I want to do some await stuff. Generate URL for external resource. Now in this function, I'm going to loop through all of the links here. Let's say you have more than one. So I'm going to say for const link of external download links. So this is going to loop through each of the links in the return array. And then in each of these links, I am now going to get the blob version of that resource and then create a URL for it. And here I'm going to use the fetch API. So I'm going to have image response and we call await fetch. And then I pass the link.href. Then here I can check if image res.ok. If the response does not have an OK of true, I'm just going to continue to the next link. But if it does, then I can move forward to get the blob version. So I have image blob equals await image res.blob. Now you know you can do image res.json, which will return the JSON format of the response, but you can also do .blob, which will return the blob version of the response. You can think of blobs as the raw version of a resource. Blobs can contain files, can contain text, can even contain arrays, but it's just this raw object version of that particular content. And now I can do console.log image blob. I don't know why I keep calling it blob. I also have to call this function. I didn't call it yet, so I'm going to call it below. So I'm going to call it below here. Now when I refresh, you see we have this blob version. Currently the only information we can see here is the size of the blob and the type of the blob, which is image/png. Okay, now that I have this blob, what I can now do is create a URL with JavaScript so that somebody can access the content of this blob. And how do you do that? Well, we can have our image URL equals url.create object URL. So this function allows you to create URLs for objects. This can be for files, can be for blobs, and I think even for other media sources. So here I can pass the image blob here. And now if I should do console.log image URL, you're going to see what the URL looks like. So if I refresh, this is what the URL looks like. We have blob :http localhost 58265, which is our current origin. Then we have this generated URL here where we can access the blob. So now if I should copy all of this and go to another tab and paste this, you see we have that image that's coming from the server, but in this case we are accessing it with the blob URL, a URL created on our own origin. If I come here and I close the tab, when you close the tab that created that URL will no longer be available. So if I should refresh, you can see this cannot be accessed anymore. And if I go back and I open the console, you can see every time I refresh, it keeps creating new URLs. So when I refresh, it revokes the previous URL and creates a new URL. And then I have this. So if I should copy this again, I'm going to close this. When I open this here again, you see we have that new URL. So now that we have this object URL, which is available on our own origin, I can now come here to say this link.href should point to the image URL. So it no longer points to that external origin, it points to our own origin that we have created from JavaScript. So now if I should refresh, if I should come to this download link and copy the link, now when I come here to paste the link, this is what it looks like: blob http this and this here. If I should refresh, a new URL will be created. If I copy the link address again and come here and paste down here, you can see that this one here is different from the one we have at the top. But anyways, now that this is on the same origin, our download link will now work. So if I come here and I click download, it now downloads the third image. Go to our finder, this is the image here. But then the image has this name, which is the dynamic blob URL. So instead of having this, you can also update the name. And how you do that is after you update the href attribute, you can also update the download attribute. So if you have the download attribute without any value, then the name of that resource you're downloading will be taken from the URL. But if you have the attribute with a value, let's just call this external something. Now this is going to be the name of the file when you click download. So if I refresh now and I click download, on my finder, you can see I now have external something, which has this image here. So a recap: when you have the download attribute on anchor tags, you can make resources on your website downloadable, but only resources that are on the same origin. In this case, where we link to a resource on a different origin, the content will not be downloadable. But for you to make it downloadable, then you have to be able to create a URL on your own origin so that it can be downloadable. And we do that by fetching the resource, getting the blob version, creating a URL from that blob version, then updating the links href to that object URL, and additionally you can update the value of the download attributes. And this is going to work for all links that have the download attributes with the href starting from http, indicating that this is an external resource. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, I'm also planning on working on a video where I dive deeper into blobs and object URLs. It's a really interesting concept in JavaScript. If you'd love to see that video and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you're notified when the video is published. But I hope you enjoyed this. Please give this a like, share it with anybody who may find it helpful.